demand to know who is responsible for this! This is completely unacceptable! Get the kids out of here! Oh my god, run!
One summer evening, my family's farm, acres of sweat-soaked history, swarmed with strangers' tents, their campfires spitting sparks into my hayfields. The HOA, led by a clipboard-wielding tyrant named Karen, declared my land their public campsite, trampling my grandfather's legacy under their picnic coolers. Then, in an instant, a foul torrent of sewage surged across the pasture, swallowing tents, dousing fires, and sending families fleeing in horror. Karen's smug grin vanished as her designer shoes sank into the muck. This wasn't a mistake, it was my land fighting back. How does a farmer push back against a neighborhood that steals his home? Stick around to find out. The farm was my world, a sprawling patchwork of green pastures and weathered fences tucked at the edge of a sleepy county road. Every morning, the sun crept over the horizon, painting the fields gold and coaxing the roosters into their proud, chaotic chorus. My boots crunched on dew-soaked grass as I trudged to the barn, the air sharp with the scent of hay and earth. This wasn't just land, it was my family's legacy, carved from wild brush by my grandfather's calloused hands after he returned from World War II. Every stone wall, every gnarled apple tree, every creak in the old farmhouse's porch held a story of sweat and stubborn pride. My father taught me to feel the soil's pulse, to know its moods like a living thing. This land was my skin, he'd said, his voice rough as the oak he'd felled to build our barn. Guard it like your life. Life on the farm wasn't easy. Dawn meant milking cows, their warm flanks steaming in the chill. Midday brought fence repairs, splinters biting my palms as I hammered posts into the stubborn ground. Evenings were for cutting hay, the rhythmic swing of the scythe leaving my shoulders aching but my heart full. It was a simple rhythm, unglamorous but honest, each chore tying me closer to the land my family had worked for generations. The red barn, its paint peeling like old skin, stood as a sentinel over fields that fed our livestock and our souls. Beyond the barn, a creek gurgled softly, its banks lined with stones my grandfather had hauled by hand. To outsiders, it might have looked like just another plot of dirt and grass, but to me, every inch was a chapter of history, a testament to resilience. I lived alone now, my parents gone, their lessons etched into my bones. The farm was my sanctuary, a place where the world's noise, its demands, its chaos, faded into the rustle of leaves and the lowing of cows. My mornings began with coffee on the porch, the mug warm in my hands as I watched mist rise from the fields. My evenings ended there too, the sky bruising purple, the crickets singing their nightly hymn. The work was relentless, but it was mine, and that made it sacred. The farm didn't just sustain me, it defined me, a quiet anchor in a world obsessed with progress and polish. Beyond my southern fence line, though, a different world loomed. A suburban neighborhood sprawled like a chessboard, its identical houses lined with manicured lawns and tacky garden gnomes. The homeowners association ruled with an iron grip, their newsletters dictating mailbox heights and grass lengths. I'd never joined their ranks, thank God, but I couldn't ignore their presence. Their leaf blowers whined at dawn, their gossip drifted over hedges, and their streetlights bled into my starlit nights. At first, they seemed harmless, just city folks chasing their version of order. I figured we could coexist, my farm and their cul-de-sacs, two worlds sharing a fence line. Live and let live, that was my creed. I didn't care about their HOA fines or their obsession with matching shutters. All I asked was that they leave my land alone. But the signs were there, subtle at first, like cracks in a dam. A paved road crept a few feet past their boundary, its asphalt kissing my fence. A community trail sign appeared one spring, bolted to a post just inches from my property line. I brushed it off as sloppy planning, trusting reason would keep things civil. After all, who'd mistake a working farm for public land? The fields weren't empty, they were alive with crops, livestock, and history. Yet, as I walked my fence line each evening, checking posts for rot, I felt a prickle of unease. The neighborhood's gaze lingered too long, their whispers carried on the wind. Something was stirring, a quiet hunger for what wasn't theirs. And soon, a woman named Karen would give that hunger a name, a clipboard, and a plan to swallow my farm whole. The farm's quiet rhythm began to falter, like a heartbeat skipping under stress. The first sign of trouble wasn't loud, it was subtle, a neon green tent pitched in the middle of my pasture one crisp morning. I stood on my porch, coffee mug steaming, staring at the intrusion as if it were a mirage. A family of 4 bustled around a portable stove, their laughter drifting over my alfalfa fields. The scent of sizzling sausages clashed with the earth's clean musk, and my stomach twisted. This wasn't a mistake. They weren't lost campers who'd wandered off the county park 2 miles down the road. Their confidence, their casual ease, told me someone had sent them here. That someone had a name, Karen. She appeared at my fence line that afternoon, her blonde bob gleaming under the sun, a pastel cardigan draped over her shoulders like a royal cloak. Her clipboard, ever present, was clutched like a scepter, her manicured nails tapping it rhythmically. She didn't step onto my land, not yet, but her gaze swept over my fields with a hunger that made my skin crawl. The HOA had been creeping closer for years, their paved roads inching past boundaries, their signs staking claim to edges of my property. I'd ignored it, trusting common sense to keep them at bay. But Karen wasn't common sense. She was ambition wrapped in a smile, the kind of neighbor who'd reorganize your life and call it kindness. By the next week, the single tent had multiplied. Neon nylon sprouted across my pasture like toxic weeds, their stakes piercing soil my grandfather had tilled. SUVs clogged my gravel driveway, their tires flattening crops I'd spent months coaxing from the earth. Children ran wild, their shrieks spooking my chickens into a frenzy of feathers. A teenager lobbed a football into my cornrows, trampling stalks I'd planted by hand. Beer cans glittered in the ditches, their aluminum catching the sunlight like mocking winks. Each morning brought new wounds, a broken fence post, a hose punctured by a tent stake, a campfire's ashes smoldering too close to my hay barn. The land, my sanctuary, was bleeding under the weight of strangers who acted like they owned it. I marched across the field, boots sinking into churned mud, to confront the invaders. Their faces were cheerful, oblivious, as they unfolded lawn chairs and sparked grills. They pointed to Karen, their voices light, as if her name were a golden ticket. She'd told them this was a community campsite, a gift to the neighborhood. My protests, that this was private property, my family's farm, were met with shrugs and rolled eyes. One man, flipping burgers on a gas grill, smirked and said Karen had cleared it. The audacity burned hotter than the coals under his meat. My land wasn't a park. It was my livelihood, my legacy, and they were trampling it without a second thought. Karen was always there, strutting through the chaos like a general inspecting her troops. Her whistle, looped around her neck, shrilled with every order she barked, move a tent here, stack firewood there. She carried herself as if my pasture were her stage. Her clipboard a script for a play only she understood. When I demanded she stop, her smile was a blade, sharp and cold. She waved a manicured hand, dismissing my fury as if it were a child's tantrum. My land, she implied, was wasted on me, empty, and used, begging for her vision of community picnics and s'mores. The word wasted stung worse than the trespassing. This land fed my animals, grew my crops, held my family's history. It wasn't empty, it was alive. The tension tightened like a noose when I attended an HOA meeting, not as a member but as a neighbor desperate to understand their plan. The community center was a sterile box of fluorescent lights and folding chairs, the air thick with perfume and self-righteousness. Karen stood at the podium, her voice syrupy with fake sincerity, as she unveiled her grand idea, a community campsite to unite the neighborhood. She pointed to a map, her pen circling my farm in bold red ink. The crowd clapped, their applause a dull roar in my ears. My hand shot up, my voice cutting through their enthusiasm. This was my land, private property, not a playground for their kids. Karen's laugh was sharp, slicing through my words. Property lines, she said, were flexible, and my farm was underutilized. The crowd nodded, hypnotized by her charisma, blind to the theft she was orchestrating. I left that meeting with my fists clenched, the echo of their cheers burning in my chest. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was rewriting ownership, convincing a room full of strangers that my family's legacy was theirs to claim. The next day, flyers appeared in mailboxes, announcing the grand opening of the HOA family campground. My farm transformed overnight into a circus of tents, coolers, and portable speakers blasting music that rattled my barn walls. Teenagers carved initials into my apple trees, their knives scarring bark older than they were. A bounce house sagged in my alfalfa field, its bright colors mocking the green I'd worked to preserve. Karen, in a glittery sash labeled Camp Director, blew her whistle and handed out tent assignments, her smile daring me to challenge her. I tried the legal route, my hands trembling as I dialed the sheriff's office. The dispatcher's sigh was audible, her voice tired as she explained it was a civil dispute, not a crime. The HOA's paperwork, vague and questionable, had enough signatures to tie the sheriff's hands. I drove to the county courthouse, my deed clutched like a lifeline, only to face a clerk who shrugged and pointed to a stack of forms. The HOA had filed for a temporary community recreation designation, and untangling it would take months, maybe years. A lawyer's voice crackled through my phone, warning of costly litigation and no guarantees. Every door I knocked on slammed shut, leaving me with nothing but bureaucracy's cold indifference. Each night, I sat on my porch, the glow of campfires taunting me from my own fields. The smell of smoke and spilled beer clung to the air, drowning out the clean scent of hay. My chickens huddled in their coop, too spooked to roam. My cows paced restlessly, their lowing a mournful echo of my own frustration. The farm, once my sanctuary, felt like a battleground, its peace stolen by Karen's ambition. Her smugness, her belief that she could erase my rights with a clipboard and a smile, lit a fire in me that no campfire could match. She thought she'd won, that her crowd, her paperwork, her whistle made her untouchable. But she didn't know the land like I did. She didn't know its secrets, its hidden veins of power buried beneath the soil. As I stared into the darkness, my fingers tracing the grain of my porch railing, a plan began to form. Karen wanted a campsite. She'd get one, a campsite she'd never forget. But how far would I go to make her pay? The sun hung high, bathing my farm in a mocking golden glow as the HOA's so-called neighborhood camping festival reached its fevered peak. My pasture, once a tapestry of green stitched with my family's sweat, was unrecognizable, a chaotic sprawl of neon tents, inflatable bounce houses, and a makeshift stage where a local band strummed off-key tunes. Smoke from barbecues curled into the sky, mingling with the stench of lighter fluid and spilled beer. Children shrieked, chasing my chickens until feathers dusted the ground like fallen snow. Teenagers carved initials into my apple trees, their knives scarring bark older than their bravado. A man dumped greasy grill runoff into my irrigation ditch, the water clouding with oil as if my land were just another landfill. The air thrummed with music, laughter, and the relentless shrill of Karen's whistle, her glittery, camp director, sash flashing as she strutted through the chaos, clipboard in hand, assigning tent spaces like a queen parceling out her kingdom. My boots sank into the churned mud of my driveway, each step a reminder of the trespassers who turned my sanctuary into a carnival. For weeks, I'd fought, pleaded with the sheriff, clutched my deed at the courthouse, begged a lawyer for help, only to be met with shrugs, forms, and excuses. The HOA's paperwork, flimsy but cunning, had tied the system's hands. Karen's smugness, her belief that her crowd and her signatures made her invincible, had pushed me to the edge. My father's words echoed in my skull, a man's land is his skin. Every tent stake, every beer can, every footprint was a cut, and my skin was bleeding. But the farm had secrets, veins of power buried beneath its soil, and I was done waiting for justice to crawl through bureaucracy. Under the cover of dusk the previous night, I'd walked the perimeter, my flashlight catching the glint of a rusted hatch hidden behind a stack of weathered pallets near the barn. It was part of the old sewage system my grandfather had built, a crude network of pipes to handle barn runoff, channeling waste to a drainage pond far from the fields. The hatch was forgotten by all but me, its metal groaning under decades of rust. I'd knelt there in the moonlight, the campers' laughter drifting like a taunt, and felt the land whisper its solution. Karen wanted a campsite. I'd give her one, a campsite that would choke on its own arrogance. The plan wasn't born of rage but of necessity, a surgical strike to reclaim what was mine. I didn't want destruction for its own sake, I wanted a lesson, one that would sear itself into Karen's memory and scatter her followers like roaches. Now, as the festival swelled, I moved with purpose. The crowd was drunk on Karen's vision, their plastic cups raised in toasts to community spirit. She stood on the stage, her voice booming through a microphone, preaching about unity and generosity as if she'd gifted me the honor of their invasion. Her sash sparkled, her smile gleamed, and the crowd cheered, oblivious to the lie that my farm was theirs. My heart pounded, not with fear but with a cold, focused resolve. I slipped behind the barn, my boots silent on the grass, and crouched at the hatch. The metal squealed as I lifted it, revealing the dark, gurgling pipes below. The system was old, temperamental, but I knew its quirks, every valve, every joint, every weak point. My hands moved with the steady rhythm of a farmer who'd spent years coaxing life from the earth. This time, I'd coax something else. The flood came fast, a low, glistening tide creeping across the pasture. At first, it was silent, unnoticed, a shadow spreading under the festival's noise. The band's chords faltered, a guitarist squinting at the grass as if sensing something wrong. Then the stench hit, a rancid, physical wall of rot that clawed at nostrils and burned eyes. Confusion rippled through the crowd, heads turning, noses wrinkling. A child pointed, her voice a sharp yelp as the brown wave lapped at a tense edge. Canvas sagged, stakes ripping free with a sickening slurp. Coolers tipped, spilling soda and ice into the muck. Sleeping bags soaked through, their bright nylon dulled by filth. The music stopped, replaced by a chorus of gasps and screams. Parents scooped up their kids, slipping in the sludge, their sneakers squelching as they fled. A teenager landed face first in the mess, his phone tumbling into the mire, still recording the chaos for the world to see. Karen stood frozen on the stage, her microphone limp in her hand, her sash absurdly bright against the disaster unfolding below. Her sunglasses slipped from her nose, splashing into the muck. Her clipboard, that symbol of her control, drooped, soggy and useless. The crowd's cheers turned to shouts, accusations flying like sparks. Someone yelled about safety, another about permits, their voices sharp with betrayal. Karen's face twisted, disbelief, then fury, then a raw, animal panic that no HOA meeting could have prepared her for. She pointed at the flood, her arm trembling, as if she could command it to stop. But the land didn't answer to her. It answered to me. The chaos unfolded like a storm breaking. Families scrambled, dragging soggy gear toward their cars, their picnic dreams drowned in filth. A father tripped, clutching his daughter as they slid across the grass, their faces etched with horror. Tents collapsed into the mire, their frames snapping under the weight of the flood. Fire pits hissed, their embers snuffed out by the relentless tide. Phones flashed, capturing every moment, the kind of footage that would haunt social media for weeks. The stench was unbearable, a living thing that clung to clothes and memories, ensuring no one would forget this day. I watched from the shadow of the barn, my chest tight with a mix of triumph and unease. This was justice, yes, but it was messy, uglier than I'd imagined. Children cried, their innocence caught in the crossfire of my retaliation. Parents shouted, their anger turning from the flood to Karen, their supposed leader. Her empire of applause crumbled as quickly as the tents, her followers abandoning her in the muck. The land had spoken, its hidden veins unleashed to reclaim what was mine. But as the screams echoed and the flood spread, a question gnawed at me, had I gone too far? The answer lay in the chaos before me, and it was too late to turn back. The morning after the flood, the farm lay quiet, its wounds raw but its pulse steady. The neon tents were gone, their soggy remnants strewn across the pasture like shipwrecks after a storm. The bounce house sagged, deflated and mud-streaked, a pathetic monument to Karen's failed empire. Beer cans and plastic cups littered the ditches, glinting dully in the dawn light, while the acrid stench of sewage lingered, clinging to the grass like a stubborn ghost. My chickens, cautious but curious, peeked from their coop, pecking at the edges of the mess as if reclaiming their domain. The cows, restless for days, settled into the far pasture, their tails swishing lazily under a sky bruised purple by the rising sun. The land was mine again, but it bore scars, trampled crops, broken fences, a soil-stained memory of chaos that would take months to heal. I walked the fields, my boots squelching in the damp earth, each step a mix of triumph and unease. The flood had been my weapon, a brutal answer to Karen's arrogance, but its aftermath was messier than I'd imagined. Children's cries still echoed in my mind, their confusion a sharp reminder that my justice had spilled onto the innocent. Families, lured by Karen's lies, had fled in disgust, their picnic dreams drowned in filth. Yet, as I surveyed the wreckage, fire pits scarred into the soil, apple trees notched with careless carvings, I felt the land's resilience hum beneath my feet. My grandfather's stone walls still stood, weathered but unyielding. The barn, its red paint peeling, loomed as a silent guardian. The farm had fought back, and I had been its hand. Karen didn't vanish quietly. By midday, she stormed to the property line, her hair frizzed, her pastel cardigan stained with mud and something fouler. 2 HOA board members trailed her, their faces tight with unease, their loyalty fraying like cheap thread. She pointed at me, her arm trembling, her face a mask of fury twisted by humiliation. Her glittery sash was gone, her clipboard warped and useless, her designer sneakers caked in sludge. She was no longer the queen of the cul-de-sacs, just a woman undone by her own hubris. The board members shifted uncomfortably, one muttering about liability, the other avoiding my gaze. I leaned on a fence post, my expression calm but my pulse hammering. The cameras had caught everything, the collapsing tents, the panicked exodus, Karen's unraveling, and the footage was already spreading, a viral wildfire no HOA meeting could contain. The fallout came swiftly. County trucks rolled in by noon, their flashing lights a stark contrast to the pastoral quiet. Health inspectors swarmed the pasture, their clipboards far more legitimate than Karen's, scribbling notes about sanitation violations and unpermitted land use. Reporters followed, their lenses hungry for scandal, capturing the muddy chaos and Karen's ruined reputation. The local news ran the story under a headline that cut like a blade, HOA festival ends in sewage nightmare. Clips of screaming families, sinking tents, and Karen's mascara-streaked face looped online, each view chipping away at her carefully crafted image. Comment sections buzzed with glee and outrage, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Who lets an HOA steal a man's farm? Karen got what she deserved. The internet, merciless as ever, turned her into a meme, a cautionary tale of suburban tyranny gone wrong. The HOA reeled under the weight of its own recklessness. The county slapped them with fines, thousands of dollars for health violations, improper land use, and falsified permits. The board, desperate to save face, forced Karen to step down as president. At the next meeting, neighbors who'd once cheered her vision shouted her down, their applause replaced by demands for accountability. Someone taped a sticky note to her chair, Queen of Crap. It stuck, both literally and figuratively. Karen's reign was over, her charisma drowned in the same muck she'd unleashed on my land. She avoided me after that, her cart piled high with organic kale in the grocery store, her eyes darting away when I passed. The fire in her gaze had dimmed, replaced by something smaller, shame, perhaps, or the realization that she'd underestimated the wrong man. The farm's recovery was slower, a labor of love and grit. Neighbors, some sheepish, some genuinely remorseful, showed up to help clean the mess. A father and his teenage son arrived every weekend for a month, hauling soggy mattresses to the burn pile and muttering apologies as they worked. I didn't forgive easily, but I respected their effort, their hands in the dirt, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth Karen had buried. We reseeded trampled fields, the green shoots a promise of renewal. We patched irrigation lines, their steady drip a reminder of the land's resilience. New signs went up, bold, unmissable, private property. No trespassing. The fences, splintered by careless campers, stood tall again, their posts driven deep into soil that had borne my family's weight for generations. The broader impact rippled beyond my fence line. The HOA, once an unchallenged force, cracked under scrutiny. Neighbors who tolerated Karen's fines for lawn heights or unapproved paint colors began asking questions they'd never dared voice. Why were they paying dues to a board that lied about permits? Why had they let one woman dictate their lives? Petitions circulated, calling for transparency, even dissolution. Some families, fed up with the HOA's overreach, put their houses up for sale, their for sale signs a quiet rebellion against the cul-de-sac empire. Karen's fall hadn't just humbled her, it had exposed the rot in a system that thrived on control and conformity. I settled back into the farm's rhythm, the mornings sharp with dew, the evenings soft with crickets. The cows grazed lazily, the chickens strutted freely, and the barn's shadow stretched long across fields that breathed again. But something in me had changed. I wasn't the man who'd once trusted reason to prevail, who'd let small encroachments slide. I'd seen how fragile rights could be when bullies shouted loud enough, how quickly a legacy could be trampled by ambition. The flood had been my line in the sand, a dirty but necessary stand against a world that saw my land as a blank canvas. Victory wasn't clean, though. The memory of crying children, of families fleeing in disgust, lingered like the stench in the grass. I'd protected my home, but at a cost that weighed heavy on my nights. Sitting on my porch one evening, the sky ablaze with sunset, a friend leaned on the railing, his eyes tracing the fields. He chuckled, saying I'd given the HOA a taste of their own medicine. I shook my head, staring at the horizon where my grandfather's stone walls met the dusk. It wasn't medicine, it was consequences, the kind that come when you trespass on a man's life, his pride, his history. Karen had learned the hard way that boundaries aren't suggestions, that land isn't just dirt but a living testament to those who've worked it. The farm was quiet now, its scars fading, but its lesson endured: defend what's yours, even if it's messy, even if it costs you a piece of your soul. So, when someone tries to rewrite your story, to claim what you've built, what do? You stand firm, and you make them smell the consequences.